computers. This is Intelligent Performance.
Irene Becker, welcome to the Intelligent Performance Podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time out late on this Tuesday evening. First of all, a huge welcome to the podcast. A pleasure to talk to you. And I'm very intrigued to get your perspectives on all things parenting, because I think you've got a unique perspective. You've worked with thousands of families, placing au pairs and matching them to maybe some desperate, some needy families out there. I think if you can you just provide a short introduction to your background, Irene, maybe a bit about how you got to this kind of CEO role of 99 au pairs?
Of course. First, thank you for having me, Michael. Pleasure's all mine. How we got there, I think it all started by working a corporate job and being a career person, really wanting a career, and being an expert in Australia. So you don't have your parents close by, and all the discussion eventually comes up, who is going to stay home to look after children? Not an option for me and not an option for my husband. So we had to find a solution on top of the extraordinary expensive childcare. So we had our first au pair when my son was 5 months old, when my hubby stayed at home. And we realized we never want to go without help. You just have to have the backup to your regular plan, and ideally another backup to the backup, right? Mm-hmm. Life is always what happens, right? You go to work, childcare calls with the sicklish child, your temperature is rising, you have inevitably school holidays and all things in between. And the further you progress in your career, and the more kids you have, and the busier it gets, and it just never stops, right? You're always on, and you always have to have the backup. And it kind of started from our own needs to constantly having to find au pairs. And I knew of the concept because I studied in Europe. So I studied in Germany. Lots of my Russian-speaking friends or Ukrainian friends were actually au pairs. And then it started friends to friends of friends, and then all of a sudden strangers. And then it was clear that there is a market and there is demand. There's desperation, as you said earlier, and people just need additional help. And modern families is, grandparents are now busy. Yeah, they live their own lives, and also not close by. So you just need to have additional support. And we have dual working parents, right? So families where both parents work. And it's just not an option. Yeah, the modern lifestyle does not support one staying at home. We just have different expectations these days and career ambition. But also there's no such thing as a 9 to 5 anymore, right? For parents, always on. But the children also need safety, attention, and a home to relax in. Long days at childcare and before and after school care. It's just really exhausting for everybody.
Yeah, and I think I was talking to, I think it was the au pair that you just recently placed. And so, full disclosure, we've just utilised your service in our family, and you've been, may I say, absolutely amazing in terms of navigating this process. Helped us ask the difficult questions, which like I think you asked one today around what if you meet a boy, where are you going to spend the night? That's you don't necessarily want the au pair. Of course, you want them to enjoy being in Australia, but don't want somebody traipsing partners back to the house and that kind of thing. That's a very tricky environment too. So, asking difficult questions like that and thinking about that even before the person has even thought of that, we found it incredibly helpful. So, just and I think this kind of really links to our podcast. So, this is all about intelligent performance. We're all about often counterintuitive thinking about to produce phenomenal results or kind of out of the box results. What would be your definition of that? How would you define what does intelligent performance mean to you, perhaps?
I think taking time to understand your customer. So if I'm working with clients, working parents, understanding my customers, their true needs. Yeah, what is the pain point? Where are they struggling? Where do they want to get to, right? Like if they say, this is where we are and it's not working for us, we would ideally want to get there, which is something they're not even thinking about. This is something we need to draw out from them, right? Because when they get to us, they're in the trenches, right? They are flooded. They're just barely keeping their head above water. So it's first identifying what's the pain point, what do we need to resolve immediately, what are the immediate gains, where do they want to get to? but also understanding the underlying needs. Also using our experience, see where will they be in 3 months and what will their new needs look like, right? Initially, they, I need someone to look after our kids. In 2 months, when they hear and see their children having a ball with their au pair, they'll be like, why am I stuck in the kitchen? Actually, I want to spend quality time with my kids. I want to read a book to them. And then let's start reject. Could you put on dinner one night? And we'll put the kids to bed, right? Or maybe divide and cook and have one-on-one time. Or maybe actually go out for date night with your partner. Like, what do you even remember the last time they had it, right? So I think it's bringing all those together, but also constantly observing the market, right? Because the market is changing, things are changing, requirements are changing. After COVID, for example, we had lots of children come through with ADHD, and autism diagnosis. So we need to be aware of this, and take it as the new reality and educate our au pairs to say, this is how you work with these children. You need to be. But at the same time, we have a whole cohort of Gen Zs and young millennials come through who also have anxiety, right? Because they were also stuck at home for 2 years. So it's then like, how do we navigate this space and support one generation, right? While understand them to help with the parents are just as much struggling and trying to navigate your reality. So I think it's bringing together experience, but then also and an understanding and working together. So to me, if I work with a family, it's really I work with you long term because your childcare needs are not going anywhere for the next 10 years, because to grow and get to the next level, right? Next year, you're going to get promoted and you're going to have a school kid, right? And this is a whole new reality, the WhatsApp groups of parents and lunch boxes and all that jazz, It's like, I use my experience from working with some parents and said, this is what works for them. Don't do the lunch boxes in the morning, do them at night, right? No one is happy, right? Everybody in the house. So it's again just using the best practice of for others and say, how about you try this? So this is just
so let's touch on it. Let's touch on this, Irene. So I'm curious. So you've placed over 1,000 people, 1,000 au pairs with hundreds of families, and I'm curious, what are some of the trends that you see, like in a high performance mum, let's say? So we're going to define that as, I think you mentioned just before we hit record, we call her Kate. She's in her 40s. She's got 3 kids. Good old Kate. Is she a brunette or a blonde? What are you thinking?
She is the bleach blonde.
Bleach blonde. She's still not tan complete. Okay, cool. So we've got Kate with the bleach blonde hair. And tell us what is the reality for mums these days that you see in terms of how they juggle the two working parents and the kids? What does that life look like in terms of maybe some of the things you've taken from it, like who go, oh yeah, okay, that's a great way. They got it sorted, handled, whatever.
So if it's Kate's first experience to host au pair, right? Again, I think the very important thing is to set the expectations right. So again, just say nobody will replace you, because you can, if you download all the 20 jobs you have done before 9 a.m. to your au pair, she will run away. If you do that to your husband, he will also run away because nobody is as high performing as you are. True, right? So again, I think it's just, again, understanding and helping her to delegate at home because on the job, she is professional. She can delegate to 30 people every single day, no issues at all. But at home, it's really difficult because it's very personal. It's intimate. And it's hard to separate. And also you have several ways because you've been so conditioned to do things so efficiently, right?
Yep.
You have your set way. So it's like, what is important? What's the one thing that is really critical to get right? And what are the things that just get done? Like, who cares how your laundry is folded, right? Like, will you bother? Will you be bothered how your laundry was folded? It was done, right? It's washed, clean, the kids are dressed, fantastic. So again, I think it's more helping you understand what is the priority and just settle down on what is there and help the au pair to kind of get to the point. If she's hosted many au pairs, very easy to work with because she knows exactly what she wants, right?
Okay.
What's important, what's not critical is basically like get the kids, drop them off at the right location when the right lunch boxes, pick them up, make sure they're all happy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if dishwasher is unstacked and the laundry's gone, I'm totally happy. Like,
Mhm.
important person in my life.
Total boss.
My husband, and the best choice I've ever made, yeah, besides having kids, right? So she's very much like an au pair is part of her survival arsenal, or so to speak, right? And then there are moms who are overachiever moms who have big careers and travel a lot, and they tend to overcompensate, which is interesting, and research shows that as well. When women get to a certain level where they potentially earn more than their partners, right, and to overcompensate, that they pre-plan everything, like almost like their work job or work trip needs to be earned. Like we try to earn our holidays, when we go on holidays in the corporate, try to finish off everything. Yeah, so it can clock off and not log online. It's the same thing. In this case, I actually bring the partners on board. I say, no, I need you to, in this room, and you, Kate, need to download to your husband all the things that happened that he's not aware of, because he will not aware of it. And it's like, all of a sudden, nothing happens, right? Because not as efficient as Kate when she's at home, because she doesn't share all of the things she does secretly, silently behind the scenes. So it's really important to understand which type of Kate it is early in her hosting career, right? In the middle, or has she gone above and beyond? And again, depends on how traditional their partners are as well. So I think it's really important to set the communication straight and expectations straight, and bring the partners on board and say, hey, I don't know, let's just say Mike. Yeah, Mike, you need to be aware. This is the list. This is what Kate has shared with the au pair. But you are the host parent now. You need to make sure that you communicate and don't just expect for it to happen, because you are the grown-up here. So it's really interesting, because I'm like part-time therapist here to say, you need to appreciate what your wife does, even though she doesn't tell you. So it's really being aware of what type of.
I'm curious from a relationship perspective, like what are you seeing in terms of, I think it's interesting the times we're going through right now in Australia and in many countries around the world. There's a real cost of living crunch. Interest rates are high. There's a lot of people who've got kids because they're leveraged. They're paying mortgages down. It's they're at the coalface in terms of the crunch, as it were. What are you seeing when you talk to families right now? Are you seeing much more where dad's playing a much bigger role, or is it still mum centric in terms of they're running the household, navigating the kids? What do you see more broadly now?
So I think over the last 5 years, probably, I've seen many more dads being very involved and happily say, hey, you know what, the Tuesdays and Thursdays, I do the pickup, I do the drop off, and they're absolutely loving it. And I think COVID has done a big kind of help to transition. All right. For dads to discover that actually this is what I want to do, because we never given ourselves permission. Like it wasn't even a thing, right? That you would take time off to look up. So, that shift has come, which is great. In terms of earning, I think there is more pressure for both partners to earn. Like where earlier it might have been a consideration, should the mom go back to work after 6 months or 12 months? Now it's almost a given, right? Like it's not a choice. It's a necessity. And therefore having additional help is also a necessity, right?
Yeah.
Just be more clear of what can be achieved, right? And again, au pairs are part of the network that helps them to work towards their goals, right? Pay off, earn whatever they want to earn.
In terms of the barriers, I'm just curious, what do you think? Why do people not ask for help? Is it purely financial, largely, or is there something else or other things that you see that, is there a big leap people have to, or a journey they have to go on? Like, do they have to be exhausted? They have to be like, oh my God, it's just too much. Is that what has to happen typically?
There's usually some life events that trigger that, oh my God, we just can't cope. Yeah. But often it's driven by moms reaching that stage where actually I don't have to do it all by myself, because how we conditioned that we have. All of a sudden, when you're a mom, you have to do everything yourself. You have to do proper adulting. Yeah. Look after other people, run the household, save money, don't spend too much, cook amazing meals, like pre-cook, do everything. I think they reach that stage, usually when they have their second child, they reach that stage where like, it's simply impossible to do it all, right? Actually, I also don't have to do it all. And then they reach a stage, I don't want to do it all, right? Because you realize even in a relationship, at some point, you just go to where your skill set is, right? What your strengths are. And not everybody is amazing at cooking, cleaning, and everything. And realize, actually, I'm not an amazing chef, and I also don't want to do that. I would rather do X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
And also realize that their earning capacity in the long term gets impacted the less they focus on work, right?
So
it's a mix of maturity, right? Of growing out of that societal pressure of having to do it all. It's like, that's nonsense. Right? Also growing the confidence that, you know what, I don't listen to other people who tell me I'm a bad mom, right? Just because I'm not there, or I go to work, or I'm not at the gates to pick up the kids. Once you grow above that, then you also give yourself permission and also that financial kind of consideration. Actually, I'm better off if I have somebody help me and I pay as a household, not even as a person. And actually, I can, in that time, in the next 5 years, if I focus on my career, I can achieve completely new heights.
And is that a conversation you have to kind of help people, not even a conversation, like a process to navigate? Is that part of what you find you get dragged into?
Not really. Usually when I speak to clients, I do give nudge to moms not to feel guilty. It's like, why? Like, feel guilty? Like, do your children feel bad if their dad doesn't put them to bed every night? Or do they feel bad if daddy doesn't make lunch boxes? It's almost like it's not even a question, right? Or if their partner goes on work trips, does anyone question him ever? Right? Right? Children miss both parents equally, right? And you're not lesser of a parent when you don't do certain. And I think it's again conversations to be had. Like even if you would have a conversation with your partner and say, do you feel bad if you don't make it for dinner like twice a week? Yeah. The same question to you. Do you feel bad? Yeah. So she probably been conditioned to feel horrible, right? If she doesn't make it to 2 dinners. And you're probably being conditioned to feel amazing if you make it to 2 dinners, right? So I think the benchmarks are a bit different. And like it's one thing what you believe, but also like what the are from our outer circles.
I think what's really interesting. So I was on a mountain bike, would be a couple of months ago now, and I cycled to the top of the hill. I was a bit out of breath. I got to the top, and I stopped and I recovered, and I overheard this conversation of 3 guys, and they were probably about 10 meters away from my work. And they were chatting about changing jobs so they could spend more time with their kids. And I thought, that's so awesome to hear, you know, and I was just, wow. And I hear more and more from dads saying that actually they'd love to spend more time with them. If you speak to senior men, they typically, the number one thing they complain about, or sorry, kind of, not complain's the wrong way to put it, but like regret, is not having spent enough time with their children. So I think there's a real, at least in the kind of in an awakened men's world, there's a real thinking, crikey, it's not all it's made out to be, this whole work thing all the time. And actually there's something else in life. You know, these are highly successful men who go, yeah, I don't have a relationship with my kids. Like, ugh. So I feel like that's an interesting vibe, right? Because I think in our household, at least, I definitely would rather hang with the children than go out and do like a networking event or go to a dinner or something like that. And I'm not saying that's every man, but I think there's certainly a change, right? So that's an interesting, that stigma, right, is what you're kind of referring to, or that maybe quote unquote traditional model, because that's what my mum stayed at home growing up. So are you seeing that changing more like across the client base in terms of they're having to not do what their parents did?
Oh, definitely. I see that changing, and I think it's amazing. And I think I think even 10 years ago, when we were just young parents, for example, we would talk to more senior colleagues, right, of myself or my husband. And they would then lament, right? Saying, I don't have a relationship with my kid. Like he's gone into else, right? That he doesn't listen. He doesn't want to spend time with us. And they were teenagers. But then at the same time, I realized I never had a chance to spend time with that because, as they say, now we understand that you have to spend the younger years with the children, right? When they want you, when they lean towards you. And if you don't give them their attention, then only they break away and find it elsewhere. And again, I think fueled by COVID to a big degree, I think we kind of had the chance to taste life a little bit, taste family, figure out our new happy place, but also prove that you don't have to be in the office all the time, right? To perform really well, or you don't have to be in one co-working space all the time, right? You can deliver amazing results for clients who also happily work from home, right? So I think that big transition is coming. Also a big movement of a lot of dads, right? Who then say, hey, actually, I want to meet other dads, right? Like we have one dad in our circle, for example, who is an amazing dad. He is besotted with his girls. He does everything for them. Oh my God. He, like if you talk high performance parenting, this is the guy. And I feel like he was such a big transformation for the local school because now you see so many dads lined up at every school drop.
That's cool.
And it's all because he started a mental health movement for dads, right? At schools to again talk about mental health, domestic violence, all those things, bringing dads together, organizing Father's Day camp out and all those things. Because he wanted to spend more time with his girls, but he also wanted to spend more time with other dads and their kids. Right. So I think it's really important that we have these movements that dads lead the way and have these conversations. As I say, even if you hear it in passing, right, it makes an imprint on you. And be involved, right? Just ask the right questions and ask your partners as well. Where do I fit in, right? Can I take a slice? Can I do the drop-offs? Can I do the pickups? Can I go to bed? And just, be more involved and enjoy it. But then have the tough conversations and make the tough choices sometimes. Change your job, right? If your company is old school, right? And they're like, sorry, we don't support that, then maybe the company for you anymore.
And that's a really tricky, that's when the rubber hits the road, isn't it? Where you start to go, it's not a fit. I don't know, I was working for a company just recently and they had 0 parent leave. Like they were a young startup and I understood why, like it's not economic for a young startup to be able to offer anything. And it's almost impossible. I know running for a startup myself, like we wouldn't be able to do it. Like it's just not an option. And I think that's, whereas you look at PwC and they can offer these incredible benefits, of like take a year or whatever it might be there, like that's great. And then I feel like there's often some great talent gets sucked out of really good potential because they have to go down the parent support route, understandably. And I think I'm curious in that regard, how do you juggle running a business and this parenting life and this kind of, what does that look like for you in terms of, you've talked about high performance parents and others, like how do you do it? Because I think to some degree you'd be a good example, Irene.
How do I do it? One day it works better, the other day not so much. But I think in general, I've always wanted to work full time. Like I work full time. Like obviously I would take like 6 months off to stay at home with the bub, and then my husband would take over for 6 months because he had the chance, right? He was by his company, and then we always had au pairs because on one hand, I wanted to have the career. On the other hand, I was afraid if I would ever go part time, I would like it so much, I would not want to go back full time. So there was always fear. But then I started the business on the side while working full time because, when you're trained to live without sleep, what could you do, right? So let's start a video. So again, it just kind of came from that need and talking to friends of friends and strangers, etc., and supporting lots of families. I built a business on the side. And eventually it was just, okay, like I can't do both. Eventually you burn the candle at both ends. And my husband was like, well, you need to make a choice, right? This, like nothing runs away forever. You have to give it a try. So eventually I quit my career. Like I would manage $150 million brands right, in marketing, and I loved it, and it was expanding, etc. But I got much more satisfaction to help another parents to, first of all, keep their job. Yeah, I had pilots who said I could accept my job and get back and remain a pilot, right? Because they're only female pilots, because you can't arrange it with your family, right? I can actually continue working and see my kids being happy and know that they can go home when after school instead of staying in after school camp, being dragged and said. I think I got much more satisfaction out of that than yet launching another product on Woolies shelves, which is great, but so, and I think for me, again, one thing that I've learned is, first of all, you can't be perfect, right? As a parent, you're going to make so many mistakes. Our parents made mistakes, right? And we have to just accept the fact that we will make mistakes. So do the best you can at any given time. There's always the concept of lots of balls. And you need to juggle. You need to choose which ones to drop, because you will have to drop eventually. And it can't be family. It can't be your kids' health. It can be your health, which we always neglect.
Yes.
And the rest is just prioritizing, right? One day you need to focus on one thing. Next day you just need to take it slow. And then on the daily, because I can work from home now, we take time in the morning to drop off the kids to school, have a coffee, and then basically take time for us as parents, 15 minutes to chit chat, maybe talk to local neighbors, and then get back to work, right? And in the time that we have. And then again, take time off for the family, focus on them, and then late night calls potentially, right? When it's required, divide and conquer, right? There's always going to be school holidays, there's going to be parties, and that's why we also have an au pair, because 3 kids and 2 parents, you are outnumbered, you are going to lose, right? So you need to bring in more support to again juggle and support you. So again, it's just prioritizing and focusing on what's really, really important on the day. So again, every day is like, okay, what is the absolute priority, and do the best you can in that time.
So Kate really is just a cover name for Irene in reality. Is this right?
It's amazing. But we get along really well because I told exactly what she wants, and she's actually a real person. And whenever something happens, I think there was one situation where her au pair broke her leg.
Wow.
And she sent me a text and she's like, Irene, this happened. Let's talk. I'll call you from the car. And I'm like, no worry. And it's very interesting because obviously there's 5 minutes of venting. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Right?
Yeah.
We're going to survive this week. And it's like solution mode. But then it's also, she's very professional and very calm and collected, which I sometimes like, you know what, you don't have to be professional with me. Just let it go. Because it all have to be, again, the super grown up and the adult and having understanding for everyone else's emotions, right? Just let it go. Yeah. So we're a little chit chat. It's like, oh my God, you're the only person who understands me. At work, I have to be professional. At home, I have to be professional. Just let it go. Just like good old buddies. And you need to have that room to kind of you know what? I'm also having my moment, right? You need the space to have your meltdown. And then, okay, solution mode. And the one thing that she really loves is actually she can delegate the issues to me. Reduce the mental load. She sends me texts and I'm like, I know what to do. This is the backup. This is the nanny that we're sending you for 2 weeks. And obviously we'll chat with the au pair, how she's going to, progress, what's the next stage. And then we'll find a replacement if required. Doing that because she was far. So it's again just having someone else in your pocket where you can just the text and say, OMG, right? Can you help? And that's what's really exciting.
I think I reflect on this process. I think we reached out to you about 6 weeks ago. It stemmed from a conversation. My wife and I, we'd been sick for 5 weeks with our 2 little bubbers. And we looked at each other in the office in this room and we went, we've got to get some help. We can't do this. This is not going to work for the rest of the year. We're in the throes of building a business, and you just can't build any momentum when you're continuously sick and no time to rest, and you have to keep performing and performing and performing and performing, both commercially but also your family. And I think it's this whole process is very powerful, and I think the acknowledgement around accepting help is a very powerful thing, right? In terms of knowing that, okay, yeah, I'm fallible. There is a cost involved, but it's not. I'm kind of struck by it's not crazy if you've got the space in your house, or if you can create the space in your house. The economic side of it actually is pretty beneficial if it allows you to unlock additional value of either working or building a business or something like that, right? So the payoff can be quickly turned into a benefit. But I think the asking for help, right? And I see so many families, and and me being one of them, it's exhausting, right? And when we really acknowledge the exhausting stage of it and how hard it can really be, I think opening up to that bit and going, crikey, maybe I could do it a hand in. Maybe actually I'd be a better parent if I got some help, right?
Yeah. And I think going back to Kate, but I have another example. One thing that, again, I learned from my clients, and she said, one thing we realized in our early 40s, we realized our health is so important, right? We want for our children for a long, long time. But if we just keep going and stretching ourselves and giving out everything at work and giving out everything at home, but not leaving anything for ourselves, we're not going to be around for much longer. Right? This is why we also choose to have help, because we can then divide and conquer, and let's just say every Thursday, right? My husband goes and does whatever he likes to do with his buddies or for sport, and I can go to gym or I can take a bath or whatever, right? So just again, re-energize. And I think it's so important to have that recognition at some point. And another example, I met with a client today, and she said before having, and she'd got a child with special needs, which is a whole new level for parents, right? There are just exhaustion on the next level. And she said, my child is now 8 years old. And she said, till I had an au pair, I just have not slept. And said, she said, only when I had the au pair, I realized how exhausted I was. I could actually let go. And I was completely depleted. Not allow myself to even feel that beforehand, because I always had to be on. I have to be the patient parent, because again, if you have a child with special needs, autistic children, you have to be your calmest, most controlled self, because they feed off your energy. Learn so much, study so much, and be your best version at all time. And imagine like how many moments we have it where we kind of like lose a moment, right? And she just had to be on it. And she said, I cannot imagine now, almost like if I have to go back and be with him all day, I have to drop everything else, because I know how much energy it requires from me. And for you as a parent, like, again, think like these days we live till 80, 90, right? And you want to have quality time. And if we're in our 40s, you have another 40, 50 years to live. Right? Just exhaust yourself now. Focus on your relationships and on your health. Then you're not going to have any relationships, and you're not going to have much health, right? So what did you do all this for? So I think it's an investment in your family and in your health and in your career.
Yeah, I think it's a really tough call to make, especially, like it can sometimes feel like you should be able to do it all, right?
No.
But I think Western society specifically, and it's interesting, you've got your partners from an Indian background, is that correct, Irene? So, they come from a very family-centric model, right? Whereas, as I understand it, forgive me, I've got friends who are like Sri Lankan Indian model, and like their family is their crew. They call their cousins like almost like brothers and sisters, because they're that closely raised. And I think it's a really powerful model, and it also works very well in terms of support, I would imagine. But what do you see in terms of have I kind of drawn that accurately, that kind of Western Eastern picture?
I think so. So I was born in Central Asia, which was Soviet at the time, right? So I was kind of like, there was this Asian collectivistic mindset, right? But with a bit of Western influence, because Russia is still kind of, they consider themselves Westerners. Um, so I had this Western influence, but collectivistic understanding. There was no aged care concept, right? Obviously, there was childcare, was all institutionalized at school and everything. But there was still this big gap of 3 months summer holidays. Imagine 3 months for kids. Like,
Wow.
oh God, this is. But for parents, it would have been quite.
Common.
It's like, what do you do with your children?
Yeah.
And I obviously never experienced the stress that my parents had to plan our school holidays. But I remember the amazing weeks that I spent at all my uncles and aunties, basically being moved around with some of my cousins, right, from one to the next, week after week, and just had the best time, right? We were kind of supervised back in the country. We would just play in the fields. In winters, we would build walls in the first half of the day and play snowballs, like snowball fights in the afternoon, and then the similar things in summers. It was the best thing. And all I remember from my parents is literally putting food on the table, making sure my school uniform is ready and ironed, and then I did my homework, right? I never remember playing with my parents simply because they didn't have the time. They just worked very hard. But I remember spending a lot of time with my uncles, my auntie, cousins, and it was the broader kind of community that raised me, right? So for me, that was to me, it is heaven, right? Having a noisy, big, loud family. It's just, to me, this is ideal family. My husband comes from a similar background. And again, for Indian grandparents, becoming grandparents is lifetime achievement award, right? This is pinnacle of that. True, it's very true, right? It's for them. It's like this is all they've been working towards, right? They have done it, right? They've done everything right so far, yeah. And I remember we obviously my husband and I met here and we lived here for a long time, and we tried to get his parents to visit us for years. And I've been married for nearly 4 years, and they would always have some excuse. We have birds, we have this, we have that to look after. And the moment we said that we're expecting a baby, they're like, book us the flights. We are coming, right? They would go shopping every day leading up to their flight to buy stuff for the baby. So it's like they were so excited. And what we didn't realize at the time, but realized like while they were there and after, is having them around was so important to us as first-time parents. Because let's be honest, we have no clue, right? You go to the hospital, you do all the prenatal classes to get you ready for the experience of birthing a child. And then they're done, right? They give you the green book. Good luck. See you later. And you know nothing. And obviously you have the adrenaline rushing through your veins for the first 3 nights, and you just don't sleep because you don't know what happened to this baby. But then after that, you're just exhausted. And it was so helpful to just have his parents, especially his mom, to be there. And I said, Mom, baby's crying. 3 weeks, starting to develop stomach issues. And she's just giving massages and doing, we just hand over the baby and just watch what happens, because we had no clue, right?
Yeah.
Even just having someone to hold the baby while you're taking a shower.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My job as a first-time mom was to feed the baby, because no one else could it, of course, and change nappies. And that's it. I didn't have the baby all the other time because the grandparents were eating or which imagine how amazing it is. But you also have support every day, right? Somebody is nurturing you, like his mom would make me laddus, which all Indians know, it's all the mix of nuts and fruits to be, right? To get you back up to speed. She would give me massages. She would give the baby massages. And it's so important in Asian culture to get the mom back up to speed. You're a milk machine, right? But it needs to be maintained, right?
Absolutely.
Sure. And it's just something that Western culture completely neglects, right? You get the baby, you get thrown into this new job completely unprepared. And you isolation, you lose your networks, you lose your confidence, your partner is back to work, you have no one to talk to. and your confidence is shattered. Yeah.
And you're exhausted.
And you're exhausted, right? It's a complete new level of challenge. And
Yeah.
it's really, really hard. And I think just again, the isolation is what causes most postnatal depressions, right?
Totally
Because
get
all of a
that.
sudden this baby is the cause of all your misery, which is really sad. So for us, it was like, we never want to go without help. So
I love it.
tell all parents, like, it doesn't have to be an au pair. Wherever your help comes from, right?
Yeah.
It could be the nice lady next door. Yeah, maybe she's a retired lady. Just invite her for tea to give you company. And actually, you're giving her company. Yeah. She will give you all the unsolicited advice you want, but she will also hold the baby for you.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to have that kind of coexistence and codependency. I had one example. One time, one neighbor, who kind of like, sometimes you end up meeting all your neighbors randomly. And then one neighbor said, oh, I had to take an Uber to, because I dropped off my car for service. And the other neighbor, who is retired, said, oh, is it so hard to walk across and ask me to drop you off? Like, I'm at home all day. And it was so interesting because we're so trained to be so independent and not anybody favors. But at the same time, there's a neighbor across the street who would actually love if somebody would ask him for something.
Yeah.
Again, sometimes creating that codependency is like, hey, do you have a bit of sugar? Right?
Yeah.
Having that reason to ask, hey, are you okay? Are you alive? How are you doing? How's your day? I think it's really important to create that codependency and creating these support networks. Yeah. Train neighbors to drop off their kids at your place so your kids have someone to play with, but at the same time, create that understanding that it's okay to drop off your kid. Right? So whatever networks, grow them, nurture them, and use them.
I think there's a real powerful message in that. I think it's a good one to kind of end on, is that, parenting can be really tough. And I think there's some really beautiful sides to parenting. And there's arguably some pretty dark and like tricky sides to it as well in terms of the exhaustion if you can't get help. I know we've been there in terms of that space, and it's been, I've often thought about the mum in particular. Like they have 9 months in that lead in, but they're not sleeping too well. Then they have a newborn, they're not sleeping too well. Like my poor wife, she's had 2 kids now. She probably hasn't slept well probably 5-6 years. In reality, there's been snippets in there, and I think that recovery piece is so critical. And in terms of this podcast is all about intelligent performance, it's certainly not that intelligent to try and suffer it out on kind of survive on your own. And I think that's especially applicable. You'd never do that in a work context, try and do everything all the time on your own, 100%. Whereas when it comes to parenting, often Western culture kind of says, yeah, that's how you should do it. And it's like, what? That makes no sense. So I think, Irene, thank you so much for sharing your insights to the 1,000 placements you've done. I can't speak highly enough of the service that you provide. I think you go above and beyond, not just a matching service. It's not like it's really helping the family understand and navigate, letting what is effectively a stranger into their home. I think you really help someone do that properly with the right systems and processes and checks, but come at it from a beautiful space of, you feel like you're dealing with someone who really is there, has done it, been true to, like, tried and tested, and like, okay, yeah, cool, you're a real master. And that's my being experienced. And so yeah, Irene, thank you for your help recently, and also thank you so much for this podcast too.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Michael.